You're listening to Engaging Early Learners. I'm Rachel Glassman, special education teacher and resource creator. This podcast is your go-to for classroom strategies and teaching support that you can actually use. Whether you're on your way to work or heading home, I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Engaging Early Learners. Before we jump into today's episode, I have something very exciting to share. This episode is officially kicking off our summer guest series. So from now through the end of August, you're going to hear from a new guest every single week. And I'll be bringing on some incredible professionals who all work with kiddos in different ways. So we have teachers, OTs, counselors, instructional coaches, and more. And these are people who are super passionate about supporting kids and helping them thrive, of course. And I know that you're going to learn a lot from them. And I think the conversations are going to be really good for everybody to hear. The best part is that these are not just amazing educators and professionals, they're also some of my very best friends. So while we'll definitely be sharing practical strategies and tips and insight, you're also going to get to hear actual authentic conversations with people who I really trust and I know they love what they do. To make sure that you don't miss any of the upcoming guests, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Engaging Early Learners so that you can see the lineup of guests for the whole summer and see reminders every week of who's coming on so you don't miss anything. Today, though, without any further ado, today I am so excited to welcome our very first guest, Mackenzie. Mackenzie is an elementary ESL teacher. We actually work in the same place, and she is incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to supporting our multilingual learners. She also shares amazing resources and ideas for teachers on her Insta page and on her TPT. So I cannot wait for all of you guys to learn from her. So welcome, Mackenzie.
Thanks, Rach. I'm so excited to be here. This is my first time on a podcast, so that's super fun.
Well, this is my first time having a guest, so we're really winging it over here. We're lucky that the computers are right now cooperating with us, so hopefully that continues for the rest of the pod. Before we jump into all the ESL things, I thought it would be fun to start with a little bit about you, because obviously I know you, I know what you do, but the listeners might not. So tell us a little bit about yourself, what you teach, what your role looks like, just a little bit before we get into the nitty-gritty.
Oh, exciting. Okay, so like you said, I am an elementary ESL teacher. I work with grades kindergarten through fourth grade in like all different settings, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more later. But push in, pull out. I got my master's degree in 2023 in English as a second language education, K through 12. I started teaching in 2023. So I'm going into my fourth year teaching, which is kind of crazy. I feel like the time has flown through like my early career, which is really cool. And now I'm like stepping into that like middle part of my career, even though it's still early. So yeah, I absolutely love and adore my job. I love the students that I get to work with. And yeah.
Have you always worked in the same school?
I have always worked in the same school. Yes.
Okay.
I will be in my fourth year in the same school.
I don't even know.
Oh, you didn't know that?
Answer. Yeah, I knew you worked in the same district, but I didn't know if you were at the same school this whole time. Have you had to change classrooms at all?
No, I actually do get to change classrooms next year, but I've been in the same classroom for the past 3 years.
Okay.
So
I love that. I love that kind of information.
Yeah.
All right. So getting into some questions for Mackenzie. What inspired you? And I know we always get this question, like as teachers, like what made you want to be a teacher? But what made you want to be an ESL teacher specifically? Because that is very specific, and so what made you want to do that?
Yeah. So I knew that I had always wanted to be a teacher, like since I was young. But I actually originally went to school to be a physics education teacher. I was very big into like science and math. It was like really like my niche. However, I was also very into Spanish. It was like my favorite subject of the day. I absolutely adored my teachers like throughout middle school and high school. And I feel like that also really shaped that I wanted to be a teacher, like in general.
Yeah.
I knew some of the ESL teachers in the district that I work in and that I grew up in. And they also let me go in and like observe, and we had these conversation cafes with the students who were in the ESL classroom, and then like we were in the AP Spanish classroom, so we got to do that, and that was really cool and like kind of opened my eyes to that world. But it wasn't until I took an introduction to education class in college, where we got to observe all different settings of elementary, secondary, special education, and ESL was actually the last one that we got to do. And at first, I didn't really know what I was walking into because I feel like the settings and like programs are different everywhere that you go. And when I went in, I got to like actually like mirror a student throughout the day because they were in middle school. And I like followed him to like all of his classes, and it actually like really upset me, like just kind of like the things that I had witnessed and like saw him struggle with, because the student who I was with was like brand new to the United States. He did not really speak any English, and I remember him being told to like write a one-page paper on an article they read, and I was like, wait a minute, like I don't think we're there yet. So I think that is like what really like turned me away from physics and like calculus and all of that I was working on. That day I called my mom crying and I was like, "Mom, I am changing my major. I am majoring in Spanish. I am going to get my master's degree in ESL." It was that night.
Yeah.
And that was it, and I stuck with it.
Wait, I love that. And I love that. I didn't
Yeah.
even know that. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And that's so sad, like that you had to experience that and like
Yeah.
see what that boy goes through, because that's, I feel like, so real for
Yeah.
kids like that.
And I think too, like it just resonated with me. I didn't really recognize that that was what was happening. And granted, like this wasn't him in an ESL setting. This wasn't him in his literacy class. Like it was kind of like, I think it was health, like,
Yeah.
which is, that is very hard, like to be adapting and like modifying activities, especially in like a health classroom. Like I don't know how many like resources are out there for that. So I think that that was what kind of like made me shift into like, actually like I want to like make a change in this kind of like world. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's a great story. I love it. So kind of speaking of that, like ESL support and what it actually looks like in the classroom. Let's just go elementary, for example, especially since that's what you do. What does ESL support look like in an elementary school in general, and then like in an ESL classroom, and then not in an ESL classroom? Like, just what does the support look like? Because I think for me, coming from the special ed world, like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
see what you're doing and I hear your stories, but I don't actually know, like, what does the support actually look like for a kid that comes and doesn't speak any English? Like, what does that look like?
So I think it depends. Like it's very different across the board by grade level, one, and then two by like English language proficiency, because we have students who like might be coming in from another country, but then also students who were born here, and then students who are like bridging into like near native proficiency, like level 5, level 6 on the WIDA scale, which is the scale that we use to like determine like English language proficiency in listening, reading, speaking and writing. And so I think that that shifts a lot of like the way we go about it. The first thing obviously is getting to know students. Like when I have a student come in who speaks little to no English, I tend to do like a newcomer interview is what I like to call it. And it's just like this document that I have written up, where I ask them like what they like, where they're from, do you have siblings, like what language do you speak at home? Even though I have that information already, I think that it's really important for them to share it because I want them to know that the language is appreciated in my classroom and like centered. And so, I ask them all of those questions. What did you like to do? When did you move here? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I kind of build what I'm going to be doing off of the push in support, which I do a lot of. I do pull out for every grade level, and I also do push in for every grade level. I shoot for literacy, sometimes math, which we can get into a little bit more. Sometimes math, but most of the time literacy, ideally writing, but I will also push in for reading. Um, just because I feel like the productive piece is an area where I need to support my multilingual learners the most. And so that's why I kind of shoot for writing. But in my classroom, I like to take whatever they're doing in science, social studies, sometimes math, which we do the language of math a little bit in ESL. Um, and obviously literacy. And I like to center whatever content I'm doing around what they're working on in the classroom. So I feel like push in is super, super, super important. It lets me pre-teach the vocabulary for them that they're going to be working with, offer them sentence starters based on whatever they're doing. Like I know my students in third grade were learning about like the racer strategy. So I kind of went into like making predictions, character traits, and things like that based on the content that we're instructing. So push in is definitely like super important to me because
Yeah.
it gives me like a window into the homeroom. But in my classroom, I tend to apply those more ESL intensive strategies. And then when I push in, I also offer like modifications and things like that for them as well.
So you really need to know like all the grades, all the subjects, everything that they're learning all the time.
Yes, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay.
Especially, it was interesting this year implementing math third grade rotations. That was crazy. One of the third grade teachers that I work with, and I started doing like math rotations where I did a lot of like language of math work with them for like 10 minutes, and then they would rotate to her for like math journals, and then, they would do like whole group independent math boxes or, whatever their independent time was,
Yeah.
which was really cool because that was the first time I've ever done something like that, and it worked really well.
And were you doing that with all of the kids in the room?
Yes. So we did it based off of like any of the math data that we had. We made groups together. And so my students were split up into two different groups. And then we kind of like merged it and had them working on like language of math. Sometimes we would do like the math problems together, especially if there were word problems, because that's where things can get
Oh, yeah.
very tricky, especially if like for my friends, I'm sure like it can be a lot. And so let's access the math by introducing the language.
Wow. I love that. I feel like people listening are going to be like, oh my God, that's such a good idea. That's awesome. And that's so cool that like you're willing to do that because I feel like not all ESL teachers are willing to like go above and beyond, just teachers in general. Like, so that's awesome that you do that. Go above and beyond. What are some of the misconceptions that you think people or other teachers have about English learners or just ESL services in general?
So I think that the big thing is that when students come in as newcomers, it's very apparent, that they need ESL services, they're multilingual learners, and what kind of like supports and strategies they need. But once they like enter the intermediate to advanced range of English language proficiency is where things get a little like tricky because a lot of the times students achieve that social and instructional language very quickly, especially when they come in and they speak little to no English. The social and instructional is really what's going to come first because that's what they're exposed to and that's what's like being repeated over and over again. So it can appear as though they've achieved this high level of English academic language like proficiency when in reality some of those higher level like language functions like cause and effect and summarizing and retelling and things like that aren't quite there yet. It can come across like, oh well, they're good, but in reality they do still need some scaffolds. The
Yeah.
tricky area comes in where it's like, okay, so which ones are we weaning off of? Which ones might they not need anymore so that they can gain a little bit more independence? That's where they start to bridge out of needing the service, I think.
Yeah. No, that's a good one. And I feel like that sometimes happens in special education too. Um, a student becomes good at something or socially better or whatever. So an outsider might think like, oh, they're good. Oh, they can go to the next setting or they could be pushed out for this. And it's like, no, but there's still so many underlying things that need to be worked on. So I feel like that's a good thing to point out.
Yeah.
What do you think a teacher should do when a student arrives speaking little to no English. And I know I have friends that are classroom teachers, like general education teachers, that have had students come in mid-year speaking little to no English. What can that teacher do?
So I obviously am biased in this by saying like the first thing that you should do is go to the ESL teacher in your building, or, multilingual learner teacher. I know a lot of the titles are changing, but we still refer to like us as ESL teachers, but the students as multilingual learners.
Yeah.
So, I think that's number one. Go to the ESL teacher, see what kind of picture you can get on the student. Any sort of data that they have will be super helpful when it comes to like listening, speaking, reading, writing. I'd say that's step one. Step two, I think, would definitely be connecting with parents. I feel like that's something that can seem really intimidating, especially because there may be a language barrier. But reaching out to the parents to get like a whole picture on language use in the home can also be like super beneficial. Um, and then I'd say moving into like scaffolding and supports and like things like that is where you kind of open up like the box of like, okay, like we're going into the toolkit because we want to make sure that the language and, experience in school is as accessible as possible. So I feel like that's where you go into like lunch ordering. Like, okay, how are we going to go about like putting in lunch order when a lot of these like terms may be new? Or, going to the nurse, how are we going to explain the way that we're feeling in our body? Like, I feel like those are things that are first and foremost, like making sure that they know how to access those resources in the building. And then we worry about even like classroom routines, you know, language of literacy, language of science, language of math. And I think that's a big part where the ESL teacher comes in as like, what modifications to put in place, whether translation tools may be appropriate, and things like that. But I think the most important thing would definitely be making sure that they have access to things that they may need assistance with in the building to maintain like safety and health.
Well, with that, so like this might be a silly question, but like again, it's a gen ed teacher. Maybe they don't speak English. This kid just walked in. Like, are you pulling up Google Translate? Like, what are you doing in like the immediate, like, right now? I need to tell him, like, if you need to go to the bathroom or if she needs to go to the nurse, like, are you using your phone? I've never experienced this. So I'm so curious, like, how this works.
So the first thing I actually do is make sure that they have like Google Translate or any translation service bookmarked in their computer. Like I know a lot of schools and like children have like access to computers.
Yeah.
That's like the first thing that I'll do so that they have access to that if needed.
Yeah.
And then I think that there's absolutely nothing wrong with like using translation, especially like if you're explaining like again, classroom routines, any sort of, again, health, safety, nurse's office, going to the bus at dismissal,
Yeah.
ordering lunch, attendance, all sorts of those, like all those sorts of things. I think you should at least use the home language, whether or not that's like translating. It's going to depend like on the student. So I feel like it's like a tricky question, but yeah, I think that you should and can translate, especially so that they know that they can also use the home language in the classroom. That's like a big thing that I am a huge proponent of is like all language is language. And like that's, I think, a step that you need to take in order to make sure that they're going to be successful in the classroom. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would say
No, I
yes.
love that. I think that's such an important note because I think even as a special ed teacher, I would not think about that like all language is language. And it's important to make sure that the students feel comfortable having their home language and English like in the same classroom because that's where they come from. And they might only speak that at home, right? I'm sure a
Yeah.
lot of times ESL kids only speak their home language at home. They don't also speak English. So it's important to make sure that they know that that language is welcome in the
Yes.
classroom.
100%.
Yeah. So, speaking of the classroom and other teachers, let's talk about collaboration because I think as I talk to all the different guests this summer, I think this is going to be a really key thing to talk about collaborating with each other. We are not on our own island, although sometimes it feels that way. We are not on our own island. We need to collaborate to best help the kiddos. So, what does effective collaboration look like for you as an ESL teacher, or what would you want it to look like?
So I think that this is like a big question, like across ESL as a whole, because it's like, what can we do to most effectively support their English like language acquisition process? I think that number one is obviously communicating with the homeroom teachers that have your students. I think that that's extremely important, whether it's, going over any data, any experiences in the classroom, the first time a student participates, like those are all things that you want to be in the know of when it comes to like information on students. And then moving forward with the collaboration piece, I think it goes into that like push in modification strategies, like umbrella,
Yep.
because I think pushing in again, like, is super, super invaluable, in a school. And it's the best way to, like, actually, like, see what they need while they are in the homeroom. And that again goes back to that collaboration piece of working together and making sure scheduling and resources. Push in is definitely where I get the most information on what my students need. But again, you can always like sit down, meet with homeroom teachers, and see, what kind of things are they really excelling in? What kind of things may they need more support in? What strategies do you think are working versus not? Because that's where you can really start to see like the language growth. Um, there's, of course, the ones like sitting in on grade level meetings and PLC and those sorts of opportunities that we have to actually like all sit down together as like a team and figure out like what the needs are and what kind of scheduling changes need to be made and things like that. But I also think as ESL teachers, we have this like unique, I want to say trait, but it's not a trait, like unique experience. I'm the only ESL teacher in my building. So I am kind of like, how we said, like, you're no, alone, but you're not alone. I know I'm not alone. There are many other ESL elementary specific teachers within my district who, I absolutely adore. I get to talk with them. I get to like work together with them during our PLCs or meetings that we have, professional developments and trainings. Um, but I think it's really important that we maintain that too, so that we kind of know like what everybody's doing, where everybody's at when it comes to like data or concerns, testing, season, all those things. So I feel like as ESL teachers, we do have that kind of like unique piece, just because again, like I'm alone, but I'm not alone. I have my grade level teachers who I communicate and work with constantly every single day. And I get to see the people that have my students every single day due to that push in experience as well. So I think that that's important.
That's awesome. What about for a first year teacher, whether it's a first year ESL teacher or a first year teacher in general? What advice do you have for those first years? Because I'm hoping that this summer we have some first year teachers listening to the pod, and let's help them out a little bit. What advice do you have for those first years, whether it's ESL or other teachers?
I think the first thing is don't panic. Like, like truly.
Sure.
Because I know, because when I was a first year ESL teacher, like I was panicked. I still
Yeah.
panic like about things. Like
Yeah.
everybody panics. And I
Yeah.
say don't panic lightly because there are like multiple people in your building who are available, especially your ESL teacher, to help you in supporting students who may not, again, speak any English, like little to no English. But I feel like it's very easy to be like, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to communicate with them? How am I going to make sure that they have what they need? How am I going to make sure that my data looks okay? How am I going to make sure? And I can confidently say, like, we will all figure it out together. It kind of goes back to what I said about like, those are kind of the first things that we worry about: bathroom, nurse, lunch, office, locations, and then we get into schedule routines and things like that. Your ESL teacher will be there to help you and assist you with all of that. Um, and then when it comes to data, we don't need to worry because it says, multilingual learner. It will say when they moved to the country or what language they speak or what levels they're at. That's never something that needs to be like too much of a concern, even though it can feel like the biggest concern, especially when you're a first year teacher. You want to make sure that your kids are growing, your instruction is effective, your groupings are working and things like that. But we also need to understand that we are meeting them where they're at, because once you see those little pieces of growth, them raising their hand for the first time, them asking you for help for the first time, or, making a friend, smiling and sitting with somebody at lunch, that's the more important data.
Yeah.
Then we can worry about ELA. Then we can worry about math. But we need to get those like stepping stones first. And I feel like that's where the ease comes in, because I'm telling you, when they raise their hand for the first time or they ask you a question for the first time, you will be over the moon excited, because that's how I feel. I get so pumped. So,
That's
yeah.
so cute. I feel like there's so many similarities between like ESL and special ed. I mean, I guess like with anything, right? Like with our kiddos that struggle a little bit. Like there's so many similarities, and like you're so right. Like the first time they do like anything that they can't do. It's with any of our kids, even a gen ed student, right? That like can't do something, and then the first time they do it. That's why we all became teachers.
Yeah.
For those light bulb moments. So, speaking of our friends with disabilities, also, I have a question for you that I don't know if you will be able to answer, because I know that this is like a constant struggle. But how can teachers tell the difference, or like ESL teachers, anyone? How do you know the difference between like there's a language barrier here and like this student needs ESL support, or this child is struggling and it's a learning disability and they need that type of support? Like, or do they need both? Like, what is the difference there? How can we maybe help explain that, if there even is one?
So that's like the thing. I'm glad you said it too, because it is a very talked about thing in the ESL field, as well as, I'm sure in the special education field.
Yeah.
A lot of teachers are trying to like discover that kind of gray area of like English language support versus maybe like special education support. Um, it's also something that I'm still working on figuring out, because it can be tricky when a lot of the things that we say like put into an IEP goal, or like a language goal that we have, can be very similar. And a big one that comes to my mind is actually like following multiple step directions. Um, like, I'm trying to think, retelling, so, like, again, those like language
Yeah.
functions that you might see a student maybe struggle with. Those are things that I consider like the gray area of like, you know is this English language support, is this special education support? And again, I feel like it's something that a lot of teachers in general are trying to figure out. And this was even something that I took a class on in college. And my professor, who had been an ESL educator for, let's say, I think 15, 20 years, was like, people are still actively studying this. It is an area in education where we want to ensure that everybody is getting what they need. But what do they need? And that is like the big question. I do believe that if a student qualifies for ESL, and let's say, they are demonstrating those typical characteristics of a student who may have a language barrier, they should be receiving ESL services. However, if they are also qualifying for special education services, and there are resources out there are bilingual assessments out there are things that you can do to determine whether a student needs one or the other or both. But I do believe if a student qualifies for both and demonstrates the qualities of both, they should be receiving both.
Yeah.
And I feel like there are a lot of ESL teachers out there who agree.
Yeah.
And it's just tricky finding that middle ground of like, do they need this? Do they need that? Or do they need both? And that is, I guess, a very hard question to answer, because language goes into everything that we do.
Yep.
So
That makes total sense. Shifting gears, let's talk just for a second, partnering with families. Like, can you just summarize for me, for us, what is the best way to communicate with families? How can schools make it easier for these families? And if you have any examples, maybe just touch on those. Like, because like I said, like it's hard enough for me to think about and conceptualize helping our kiddos that don't speak English. And now we want to like communicate with our families and get them involved. How do we do that?
Yes, so I think one thing that my district does a really, really nice job of is ensuring like language access across like school websites,
Yeah.
emailing, and this is something that's relatively new. So any blasts or any sort of communication that goes out to parents, if the parents indicated on their like registration forms that they speak primarily another language at home, it will automatically translate to them when it gets sent out, which I think is super, super cool and super important,
Yeah.
especially because like having access to that information with the barrier removed or slightly lessened is essential to ensuring that families feel welcome and appreciated, but also that they are informed in as many ways as possible of what's going on in their student's school or district. So
Yeah.
I think that that's really, really nice that we do that. But then also like ensuring communication between like teacher to parent is also super important. I'll send home newsletters with my students, translated versions as well as English, just so that I am sending both. Any sort of letters identifying students maybe needing services, those are all translated. And then any emails or report card comments, progress reports, anything like that, the homeroom teachers in my building come to me and I will translate for them as they need it. And obviously, I don't speak every single language that may be present in my building. I do speak Spanish, like I said before, I studied that in college. So I'll translate those myself, but I will also use translation tools in case, a student may speak Vietnamese or Chinese, Korean,
What translation tools
Portuguese.
are you using?
Um, Depending on like what I'm looking for, or if I want to ensure something is properly translated, the first website that I use, especially with Spanish and Portuguese, I use WordReference.
Okay.
It is more of like a bilingual dictionary kind of website that I've used since I was in high school. Like
Okay.
my teacher, my Spanish teacher was like, "You're not using anything but WordReference. If you need anything, you're not going to Google Translate. You're going to WordReference." And it was like you're looking for one word. You're
Okay.
typing in dog and it's telling you dog. So those kinds of tools are really awesome, as well as just like handheld bilingual dictionaries, but those aren't exactly translation tools. Those are more like resources to like find a specific word or phrase.
Yeah.
Um, I do use Google Translate because our district is a very large, like Google district. So I will use that first, but I will also cross-reference myself with other sites. I know that there's one that I typically use, but the name of it's not coming to my head right now.
We can always link
But our
it.
district,
We can link
hmm,
it down below. Like if you think about it after, we'll put it.
perfect. And then the next one that we use is also these Pocket Talk devices. It almost kind of looks like an iPod, like they're very small, but
Yeah.
it has multiple different languages on it. I think 20 or more. And like students can use them in the homeroom. You can keep them and use them as necessary
Okay.
for any sort of translation need that you might have in like a parent teacher conference or anything like that. Those are super cool. I love using them, especially with my students who come in and, they speak little to no English. I think
Yeah.
it's really important for them to just have that like quick access to language. Um, a big thing that I used them for was actually turn and talks in second grade because the homeroom teacher came to me and he was like, I'm not really sure what to do here. Like, I want to do turn and talks. I want to do like partner work and group work, but I also don't want the student to feel isolated in it. Like, oh, well, I'm just in this group, but I can't really contribute to it. So that was where that device kind of came in and really helped this student to like interact and mingle with her peers. So then once she kind of had that like foundation of like friendliness and like relationship,
Yeah.
um, when she started acquiring more English, it made her transition into like the social setting a lot easier. So,
I love that. I didn't know those existed.
yeah,
That's
they're
awesome.
cool.
I actually have a parent that has translation headphones. So when we
Okay.
talk, it translates for her as I'm speaking, and
That's really cool.
she hears it in her language. I had never seen anything like that when she was coming to visit the classroom with her child. This was like mid-year. I knew that she did not speak any English. So I was, a little worried, and I was ready to Google Translate or whatever I had to do. And she was like, "No, I have these headphones and it's translating everything you're saying, basically." And then for her to talk to me, she was just using her phone and like showing me. So we were able, I mean, it was as if there was not a language barrier. It was so cool. So cool. So I can only imagine how those like little iPod type devices
Yeah,
help the kids. That's awesome.
that's super cool.
I know the
I like
headphones,
that.
right?
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. So, shifting gears completely because I have asked you, I think, all of the questions I could possibly ask you, and I have exhausted probably you and the listeners on all things ESL and teacher related. Let's shift gears to you again and talk about now you have an Instagram page, you have a TPT store now, all within the past couple of months. You're already making sales, you're already sharing great ideas on Instagram. So I'm curious. I know only a little bit of this answer, but I'm sure everyone else is curious. Like, what made you do that? What made you want to start a new Instagram page just for teaching stuff? What made you want to start your TPT store? And then tell us, like, what you post and all the things.
So I decided to start my Teachers Pay Teachers page first and foremost because I feel like I'm constantly like creating resources based on my students' needs because I know every teacher in general, but also ESL teachers, like the needs are so different based on language and background and all those sorts of things. So if I found myself creating all of these resources for myself, then I'm sure that somebody else might be in a similar situation or like in the same boat.
Yep.
So I feel like that was why I really wanted to start it because yeah, if I'm making it for myself, then somebody else probably needs it. So that was one big reason. And then another big reason is that I feel like the ESL like world is constantly changing and constantly adapting to, all sorts of new research and information that's out there. Um, so I think that that was one reason why I started that. And then I started the Instagram after I started the Teachers Pay Teachers store because I just think that it's important to share like student experience and like my experience as an ESL teacher because kind of going back into the same thing, like if I'm experiencing these things and I have these concerns or I have these student needs, there are other people out there who have the same needs. And why don't we kind of like come together in like our little social media world or like our Teachers Pay Teachers world?
Yeah, well, and then it's such a good way for you to share what you're making for TPT too. Like, I
Yeah.
love seeing your Instagram stories or your posts about what you're making because I'm like, oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. And if people like me are seeing it and they need it, then they're going to go over hopefully to your TPT store and buy it. And you're already making sales. I'm so proud of you. That's
Yes.
awesome.
Thank you.
And all of your stuff is so nice. You definitely want to make sure you check Mackenzie out. So, speaking of that, how can they find you? How can they follow you on Instagram? How can they get to your Teachers Pay Teachers store? Maybe if you could share a little bit about the type of resources you have.
Sure. So first, my teaching Instagram is called Early English Explorers. You can just search me on Instagram and find me there. But for Teachers Pay Teachers, it's the same. It's Early English Explorers. And you can either search that or you can search some of the resources that I've been working on. The main ones that I've actually been working on right now are to prep for the beginning of the year, which include, again, like lunch ordering survival kits for newcomers. I'm currently working on a nurse's office survival kit for newcomers, which
I
will be
love
coming out
that.
soon. Thank you. I also create a lot of vocabulary cards because I think that pre-teaching vocabulary is super important for students. I have them regarding money, weather, emotions, some of the seasonal vocabulary that's out there, as well as like classroom language. So like listen, look, read, write, just to like provide access to those, whether it's like a desk visual or a picture dictionary that somebody puts together. Those are all kind of out there. So you can search some of those terms like ESL, emotion vocabulary cards, things like that. You can find me there. And then I also work on some sort of like assessments, some writing activities, some listen and color activity packs, which are super fun to make, but
Love them.
also to give to the students because they love it. It's almost like a directed drawing.
Yeah.
So they get super pumped when I give those to them, and I figured that other students might feel the same. So those are out there too.
Yeah, and as I see you posting all your things, I'm like, oh, my kids could use that. My kids could use that. So it's not just for like ESL students. I feel like it's for any student at the elementary level that maybe needs that pre-teaching of vocabulary, needs help following directions. I can't wait to see your nurse's office stuff, your lunch count stuff. I think that's so helpful for, I don't know, all the little kiddos. Like
Yeah,
definitely I need to be
100%.
downloading some of your things for
And I
my.
say like a big thing on my like page is definitely like I'm an elementary educator specifically for English as a second language and multilingual learners. So everything is designed to be elementary friendly, but with always my multilingual learners in mind. So,
I
yeah.
love that. So definitely go check out Mackenzie. We will link all of her links below. And anything we talked about today, like those translating tools and stuff like that, that word reference website, Mackenzie will give me a full list and we will put it down below so that anyone that wants to check out those things can. I hope that everyone enjoyed our first guest episode. Mackenzie, thank you so much for coming on. I hope this was fun and that maybe you'll want to come back again.
Yes, definitely. This was so much fun. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you soon. Bye.